There is a specific number that haunts the history of empires. It is not a date. It is not a coordinate. It is a ratio. Throughout history, whenever a superpower reaches this mathematical point, the outcome is never a debate. It is a diagnosis. Rome ignored it. The Spanish Empire laughed at it. The Kingdom of France lost its head over it. And the British Empire quietly dissolved because of it. They all believed they were special. They all believed their power made them immune to the laws of economics. But in the end, math is the only true emperor. Right now, the United States has crossed that same red line. We are currently adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days. That is $10 billion a day, $400 million an hour. But the raw number isn't what should terrify you. The terrifying part is why we are borrowing it. We are no longer borrowing to build roads or win wars or go to the moon. We are borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money we already borrowed. In economics, this has a name. It is called a debt spiral. And once a nation enters the spiral, there are only two ways out: default, which destroys the government, or hyperinflation, which destroys the people. The year 2025 is shaping up to be the tipping point of a cycle that repeats every 80 to 100 years. We have seen this movie before. We know exactly how it ends. The only question remaining is, are you prepared for when the credits roll? To understand where we are going, we have to understand the trap. A debt spiral doesn't happen overnight. It is a slow, seductive process that feels like prosperity till the very last moment. It's like a person using one credit card to pay off another. For a while, you can maintain a lavish lifestyle. You can eat at the best restaurants and wear the finest clothes. Your neighbors think you are rich. But beneath the surface, the compound interest is growing like a cancer. Eventually, the interest payments become larger than your income. That is the mathematical event horizon. History provides us with 3 perfect autopsies of this death by finance. Let's rewind to the 17th century. The Spanish Empire was the master of the world. They had discovered the Americas, and ships full of gold and silver were flowing into Madrid every single month. They were the richest nation on earth, but this wealth was a curse. Because the money came so easily, Spain stopped producing things. Why build factories or farms when you can just plunder gold? The Spanish crown began to spend lavishly on endless wars, on grand monuments, on a massive bureaucracy. They spent more than the gold ships could bring in. So, they started borrowing. They borrowed from Italian bankers, promising that the next fleet of gold ships would pay it back. But then, the ships started arriving late, or they sank, or they were empty. To pay the bankers, Spain devalued its currency. They took the silver coins, melted them down, mixed them with copper, and told the people they were worth the same. It didn't work. Inflation exploded. The cost of living destroyed the Spanish peasantry. Between 1557 and 1627, the Spanish Empire, the richest entity in history, defaulted on its debt 4 times. The lesson from Spain is simple: hubris. When a nation believes its wealth is infinite, it stops doing the hard work that created the wealth in the first place. But if Spain was a tragedy of laziness, France was a tragedy of mathematics. Fast forward to 1780. France was the cultural superpower of Europe. But the French crown had a problem. They hated the British. So, when the American colonies rebelled against England, France saw an opportunity. They borrowed massive amounts of money to fund the American Revolution. It worked. America became free. But France was left with the bill. By 1788, the financial situation in Paris was catastrophic. Look at the numbers, they are chillingly similar to today. In 1788, 50% of the entire French national budget was spent just to pay the interest on their debt. Not the principal, just the interest. That left very little money for the army and almost zero money for the people. When a bad harvest hit and food prices spiked, The king had no financial room to maneuver. He couldn't subsidize bread. He couldn't lower taxes. The debt spiral had snapped the social contract. The people realized the system was mathematically broken. And when you cannot solve a debt crisis with money, you solve it with blood. The French Revolution wasn't just about liberty. It was a bankruptcy proceeding executed by the guillotine. Then there is the third example, the one that looks the most like us, the British Empire. For 100 years, the British pound sterling was the world's reserve currency, as good as gold. Global trade ran through London, but then came two world wars. To survive them, Britain had to borrow unthinkable amounts of money, mostly from the United States. They won the wars, but they lost their balance sheet. By the 1950s, Britain's debt-to-GDP ratio was over 200%. They tried to grow their way out of it, but the weight of the interest payments was too heavy. The market sharks smelled blood. Investors realized Britain didn't have the gold to back up their paper money. They started selling the pound. The climax came in 1956 during the Suez Crisis. The U.S. threatened to crash the British bond market if Britain didn't back down from a military operation. Britain had to retreat. In that moment, the world saw that the empire was bankrupt. It dragged on for 2 more decades, a slow, painful decline of inflation and stagnation, ending in total humiliation in 1976, when the United Kingdom, the former ruler of the waves, had to go to the IMF, cup in hand, begging for a bailout package. The pound lost its crown. The dollar took the throne. When you analyze these 3 stories, Spain, France, Britain, a clear pattern emerges. It is the life cycle of imperial collapse. It happens in 5 distinct stages. Stage 1 is the boom. The nation is productive. It has little debt and hard money. It grows rich through industry and trade. Stage 2 is the hubris. The nation becomes the top superpower. It feels invincible. It starts outsourcing its industry and replacing production with finance. The standard of living is high, but it's increasingly funded by borrowing. Stage 3 is the spiral. This is the turning point. The debt becomes so large that the government has to borrow money just to pay the interest on the old money. This is Ponzi finance. Stage 4 is the debasement. To keep the game going, the central bank begins printing money to buy the government's debt. They call it quantitative easing or yield curve control, but it's just a fancy word for inflation. The currency begins to lose trust. Stage 5 is the reset. The system breaks. A new currency or a new global order is established. Which brings us to the terrifying reality of today. Look at the United States. We are not approaching the cliff. We have already driven off it. Like Wile E. Coyote, we just haven't looked down yet. We are squarely in stage 4. Here is the data that proves it. For the first time in history, the U.S. government is spending more on interest payments than it spends on national defense. Think about that. The greatest military machine in human history now costs less than the fees to the bankers who finance it. We are borrowing during peacetime as if we are fighting a world war. And just like France in 1788, we are approaching that mathematical wall where the interest eats the entire budget. So, what happens next? What happens in 2025? The government has only 2 choices. Choice A is the hard landing. This means austerity. The government slashes spending. They cut Social Security. They cut Medicare. They cut the military by 50%. They raise taxes to 70%. This would stop the debt, but it would cause a Great Depression that would make 1929 look like a picnic. No politician will ever choose this. It is political suicide. That leaves choice B, the inflationary depression. This is what they will choose. This is what they are choosing. Since they cannot pay the debt back in honest dollars, they will pay it back in dishonest ones. The Federal Reserve will print the money to pay the government's bills. They will sacrifice the value of the dollar to save the bond market. This leads to a phenomenon called financial repression. It means that the price of everything you need, food, energy, housing, will skyrocket. Your salary might go up a little, but your purchasing power will crash. You will see the stock market go up to all-time highs, and you will think the economy is doing well. But it is an illusion. The stock market is only going up because the dollar measuring it is going down. We are seeing this already. The price of gold is hitting record highs. Is gold becoming more valuable? No. Gold is a static rock. It doesn't change. Gold is the constant. The price of gold is rising because the dollar is collapsing against it. Look at the geopolitical chessboard. Why are China, Russia, and the central banks of the global south buying gold at the fastest pace in history? Why are they building the BRICS payment system? Because they know the history of 1976. They know the British pound moment is coming for the US dollar. They are exiting the theater before the fire starts. The consequences of this will be the defining story of the next decade. When the debt spiral reaches its terminal velocity, the middle class gets wiped out. Cash savers are the losers. If you work hard and save dollars in a bank account, your labor is being stolen from you hour by hour through inflation. It is a silent tax. It is a tax that requires no legislation and no voting. But here is the most important part of this video. The collapse of an empire's currency does not mean the end of the world. Rome fell, but Italy is still there. The British Empire ended, but London is still a financial hub. The system resets. Wealth changes hands. The people who get hurt are the ones who trust the blindfold. The people who thrive are the ones who see the pattern. We are entering a period of high volatility. The passive investing. Strategies of the last 40 years where you just buy stocks and bonds and wait might not work in a world of stage 4 debt. In a debt spiral, real wealth flees to hard assets. Things that cannot be printed. Gold, silver, commodities, prime real estate. And yes, for many, Bitcoin, which was born specifically as an antidote to this very problem. History is a wheel. It turns slowly, grinding down the arrogance of empires, turning winners into losers and losers into winners. The United States is currently walking the same path as the Bourbons of France and the Habsburgs of Spain. The math is undeniable. The timeline is accelerating. You cannot stop the tide from coming in, but you can learn how to build a boat. The year 2025 will likely be the year the mainstream wakes up to the debt spiral. But by then, the smart money will have already moved. Do not be the last one holding the bag of paper promises. If you want to understand the mechanics of this machine, how to navigate the storm that is coming, make sure you are subscribed to Economy Rewind. We don't just cover the news. We uncover the history that predicts it. The clock is ticking.